We started the Courage chapter sometime in November last year. And as part of the community engagement, what we've started to do is that we run monthly Courage cafes or webinars. And this is our fourth Courage cafe that we are running. And this month's topic is about transitioning with courage. We have two remarkable guest speakers here today. We have Daniel and Carol. So in the later parts of the presentation, you can hear firsthand on how a public servant navigated the startup world and how a banker thrived in the public service. So we can discover their motivation, challenges, and invaluable lessons that they learned along the way. And with that, because I think there are some unfamiliar new names that we have here on this webinar. So I'm just going to go through like a quick introduction about what the Courage chapter does. So for myself, I think why I started the Courage chapter is that I personally experienced someone close to me who was forced to an early retirement. And I believe that it is not just me alone. I think we all have heard of someone close that have faced or are facing barriers to employment due to age. And that can be an incredibly frustrating and also eye-opening experience. And for me, I think I have a background in HR. And sometimes through my course of work, I wonder where senior workers fit in society as they transition into retirement. So here I am at the Courage chapter, really advocating for a dignified and purposeful continuation of work. And the name Courage chapter here also reflects my belief in the courage needed for me and also for others to challenge the norms and to redefine personal and social narratives to embrace and celebrate the beauty of every life stage. Honey, do you want to unmute yourself and say hi?
Yeah, hello everyone. I'm the other half of the Courage chapter. Jess's co-founder. So I think Jess gave a brilliant introduction and quite similar to her. I think it's a very similar narrative that we see. And over here, we're really trying to pilot like new employment models. So I think later maybe along the way, if it comes out, maybe we can share some of what we do, like some experiences that we've had also facing different people in different types of employment types and projects. Yeah, so I think in the meantime, we won't hold the time back from our guest speakers. So handing the time back to Jesslyn.
Thanks, Connie. A little bit about what we do over here, right? We help returnees. The word returnees here is a fun word pun of using the word returning and the word intern. So we help returnees transition to their second chapter through meaningful projects with companies leveraging their expertise for greater business impact. And what we do here at the Courage chapter is we could think about it into three pillars. We integrate these synergies into our business model by providing like talent solutions through our flagship returnship model. So where ex-senior professionals provide fractional consulting services designed for agility and impact, where they can also provide cross-industry innovation and mentor the next generation through this program. Secondly, I think the second pillar you could see over there, we also provide cross-industry innovation. We also meet the needs of companies that require temporary staffing services to bridge a talent gap. And the idea of all these like time-bound programs is that the seniors can get to pick projects and match their interests and experience to different companies and industry all within the same year. And yet at the same time having the time and flexibility with their loved ones and also to pursue hobbies. And the third pillar over here, we are planning to move upstream, working with companies to help their aging workforce transition to their second chapters through running interactive workshops and coaching programs. So the idea is that our clients of today will become our candidates of tomorrow. And since we started in November last year, these are some of the success stories that we have had. I think we have companies like you've seen over here, Unilever, Apex Secretariat, Koya, and Paradigm. They have shown interest in engaging our seniors in meaningful projects. And our experienced talent here have found various roles from consultancies to operational ones across MNCs, startups, and charities as well. So that's a very, very quick pitch about what the Courage chapter is about. And if you haven't already, please scan the QR code and join the Courage chapter community. Okay, so that's a little bit about what we do. With that, I want to introduce our first speaker. Our first speaker here is Daniel. Daniel has diverse exposure across several banking sectors, managing the accounts of large corporate and SMEs across the region in the area of corporate and retail banking, syndication, trade finance, fixed income, equity advisory, as well as a credit approval. He's also passionate about paying forward, having served on examination boards of the Financial Planning Association of Singapore. Daniel is also a mentor under the NUS Society Mentorship Program and a counselor and an assistant general manager at a nonprofit responsible for recruitment, finance, and training. And with that, Daniel, over to you.
Okay, thanks, Jess, for the introduction. I hope everybody can hear me properly. Okay, I thought maybe I can start sharing about my own experience when I transitioned from a private sector into the charity. So I will kind of cover three main areas. One is the pivotal moments, the moments which I felt that, I needed to do something different, my motivational factors, and the last part of this first section will be about considerations, which I think everybody should think about as you go about doing your career transitioning. So what are these pivotal moments that I talk about? Huh? Okay, in my banking career, I'm very grateful to have the opportunity to travel to visit 13 countries, 35 cities on business, and then to be exposed to this world of high finance, to experience the anxiety, the stress, and the high intensity of deal making, closure, and execution. I think many of us, the older ones, will probably have felt that in your different industries. So I did same for myself. But every city that I visited, I kind of noticed that there were still many underprivileged people. And I find that the divide between the haves and have-nots are in some places is very stark. It's very obvious. And that kind of struck me a little bit. I think the other pivotal thing that I have is something that happens throughout my life. I somehow associated myself with the so-called inverted comma underdogs. Maybe the primary school I attended was very near the kampongs. I spent time playing marbles and things like that in my friend's home after school. So I tended to be quite sensitive to people who are a little less fortunate. I sympathize with the way they live their condition. Okay. And I'm very touched. I'm very moved by their stories, especially if they are intertwined with some of their successes. So therefore, I kind of thought to myself, what are these motivations that I could think about? What are these pull factors? And to me, this is important. Maybe you want to go on to the next slide. Maybe what's important is the motivating factor. Okay, I'll come to that when I talk about consideration. I'll repeat this again. First thing is, can you be or can I be part of their story to make their lives better? Can I make a difference in somebody's life? Can I have an impact by helping someone, his family or her family, to become more socially mobile? And generally, when you say socially mobile, you actually mean things like, can I get them a job? Can I get them a proper education? Can I improve their health conditions and so on and so forth? Okay. Can I leave a lasting impression, lasting legacy to benefit all these people who are less privileged? And what role? What role can I play in paying it forward, in giving it back to society? So it is vital. I must repeat that many times that you have to truly understand yourself, discover what are your motivations, because this genuineness will show through. Okay, and that will come out in your interviews. I will run through that under the considerations. The genuineness will actually show through. So it takes courage. It takes courage to start to consider this new chapter. I'm playing the word courage chapter. It is not a spur of the moment decision. As I mentioned, many things happen. My pivotal moment is not one moment, it's many moments throughout your life. And it is a hand to heart commitment that you make. Okay. It is not a decision that you just make alone. Okay. So then what are these considerations that you may wish to think about before you transition into a career in social service? So the considerations, I put it as 5, but actually there are a lot more than 5, and it's certainly not comprehensive. There are people who have different ways of viewing things. One is you have to consider is your, by the way, all these questions, all these things I'm going through, I actually interview questions, okay? These are the questions that we look for when we see a person is genuine or not genuine. One is family support lah. In terms of the time and the perception of your family thing, do you think about your transitioning exercise? Do you have responsibilities to your kids or your elderly at home? That means always need to be at home. You need to always be with your kids, things like that. Then what about your spouse? What about your children? What do they think about this transitioning? So family support is crucial. The other is your own social circles. How will your friends look at you, view you? Okay. Let me give you an example. I was invited to a church service by an ex-colleague in Marine Parade. So we kind of had food first before we started the service. So, we chatted and then I asked around, so what you do? I was wondering what the answer to me. So after a bit of hesitation, this person said, actually, I work in a medical setting. I said, what do you mean by medical setting? Are you a doctor? Are you a nurse? He said, no, I'm not. I actually do charity work, but he's paid for it to help elderly to wash themselves. So he goes to a certain place and he helps people to wash himself or herself. I found this very enlightening, something I never came across. Okay. So number three things that you really need to consider is your own well-being. Okay, by that I mean your own physical health. What's your energy level? It is not a switch off job or a job that you just go into retirement. I think sometimes you may even have to work harder. Okay, how about your own mental and emotional health? Okay, are you adaptable? Can you adjust to different people whom you may not see regularly in your normal life? Okay. Number four, for certain, this is a tricky one, your own lifestyle adjustments. Lifestyle adjustments always then depend on which stage of life you're in. And certain things you need to consider is your own financial status. How's your mortgage payment? How much you really minimally need? Are you thinking of upgrading to a better accommodation? How about your children's education? You plan for them to study in Singapore or overseas? It's a big deal to go overseas to study. How about any medical conditions of yourself, your children, or your family? Because these are expensive things. How about your leisure? Okay. You may have to do shift work depending on the sector that you choose to go in. And overall, what's your retirement plan? What's your time horizon going forward? Okay. How long, how much, when, and what is enough? Okay. I just take a little digression here and say that if you choose to come like myself from a banking sector, private sector to a charity sector, expect to pay 5 to 6 times less income tax. So it's something you got to think about. Yeah. So I mentioned family support, social circles, your own well-being, lifestyle adjustment, and the last one is I would use the term work-life balance. Okay. Work-life balance to me means the number of hours you spend working. Okay. But I prefer to use another term called work-life harmony, doing what you think is meaningful. When you're doing something you think is meaningful, actually more hours at work doesn't really care. Okay. So in other words, when you don't transition into a social service work just because you need a job. Okay. Do it because you think there is a calling. Okay. So as I mentioned, these few things that I mentioned, the 5 points, are actually questions that when we interview candidates, we actually ask. We don't ask them directly because under the Employment Practices Act, we're not supposed to ask direct questions, but we'll find a way to make you tell me a bit more. Okay, so the genuineness of your motivation and considerations. Okay, let me go on to the next part. Okay, yeah, basically, I think that's what I want to share on these first 3 parts, the pivotal moments, the motivations, and the considerations you want to think about.
Thanks, Daniel. So far, we haven't had any questions for Daniel yet. So, audience, please, if you have any questions or comments about, like, for the guest speakers, feel free to drop them in the chat box. I think in Daniel's segment, I think he talked a lot about the social service, transitioning into social service. He talks a lot about genuineness. I think you really have to be in it for the right reasons. So have a think about, like, if you are curious about the sector, if you're curious about career transitions, have a think about what kind of questions or curiosity that you have for Daniel. Feel free to pop them in on the chat box later. And with that, maybe I'll pass on to our second speaker. A quick introduction about Carol. So Carol here, she spent 2 decades in a wide-ranging roles at two public sector organizations before taking a leap of faith into a tech startup, solo entrepreneurship, social enterprise, and nonprofit work. So she is a foresight coach, a serial career transitioner, and a portfolio careerist. She is passionate about empowering organizations and individual professionals to be future fit so that they can navigate and innovate desirable futures for themselves with creative confidence, resilience, and alignment to their North Star. And with that, Carol, if you're ready, the time is yours to share.
Thank you very much, Jesslyn, for the introduction. I can take over the screen sharing, right? Is that okay? Okay, cool. Thank you. Put this up. Okay, let me know if you can all see the screen share. I think should be okay, right? Okay, all good?
Would you want to put it full screen? Yeah,
Yes,
there we
I'm
go.
at full screen now.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. All right, cool. Okay, thanks again, Kai-Ning and Jesslyn for inviting me to this Courage Cafe. I'm very delighted to be here to share my experience transitioning from public sector to various other sectors work. So I thought that maybe I would just give a quick run through of my journey in life and career so far. I do a lot of work related to foresight and futures thinking throughout my career. It really started from my first career as early as that. I was an urban planner at the Urban Redevelopment Authority, and I was doing long-term planning. And that itself had some relation to the my university education as well. And I was already doing some scenario planning as part of my coursework. So that carried through into my first job at Urban Redevelopment Authority. And then I moved on to a public tertiary institution for the second decade of my career. And I did a whole host of different things on branding, marketing, outreach. And there was also a bit of that foresight work in terms of being involved in a project that was looking at the future of tertiary institution and tertiary education in Singapore. So after about nearly 20 years of being in the public sector, I think most people thought that I would become a career government officer because 20 years already, right? So when I decided to leave the public sector, it was quite a shock to my colleagues, and I think even my family, like my mom, and my sis family as well. And some friends didn't really understand why I would give up all that, social equity and all that I've built up to decide to do public sector work. So later I will explain a little bit more why I decided to do that, right? I then went on to decide that I want to try out private sector. And as it is, I got an opportunity to try out a tech startup. And at that point in time, I had a few different considerations. One part of me wanted to continue working on branding, marketing, and outreach. So I did actually try to talk to a few recruiters in those private commercial marketing agencies. Interestingly, one of the comments that I remembered from a recruiter was that she felt that they would be able to hire like younger staff, at a lower cost, right, at a lower salary to do the work. Whereas I was kind of seen as too expensive and overqualified for the work. So that was that part of the story. As it turned out, I decided to quit anyway, and I left without a job because I just really wanted to force myself to do a reset. I didn't want to become a career public servant. And strangely, as I closed the door on myself for that chapter of my life, another door appeared, and there was an opportunity to join a tech startup here. So I ended up 5 years with them and led the operations, customer success, as well as the product management. It was a very multifaceted role, and I grew a lot during that period of time. So I went from public sector to private sector. After 5 years in the startup, I decided to leave the startup, and I wanted to try other kinds of work, where I've not had a chance to. So one of those things that I really wanted to go back to doing was really this whole field related to foresight work. I really enjoyed doing futures thinking related, foresight related work. And I also wanted to explore coaching. That was something that I put a stop at when I decided to take on the edtech startup work. So now I'm a speaker and an advisor and coach for companies who want to become more future fit in the VUCA world that we live in. So I coach them in foresight. I also use my foresight training to do personal futures coaching for professionals, so that when they are, in moments of transitioning or they feel stuck in wherever station of life they are at, then I coach them through how they can design and craft preferred futures for themselves with confidence and courage. In the past year, I went on to co-found 2 nonprofits here in Singapore. One's called Teach the Future Singapore, and the other one is called Playful Teen Singapore. I also picked up mental fitness coaching, so I also coach in this area. I worked with a social enterprise here in Singapore as well. So I do youth coaching and mentoring in wide-ranging areas, from education and career guidance to business innovation and entrepreneurship. And for these various transitions that I've made and tried out different things, I was given the Singapore 40 over 40 Inspiring Women Award last year for under the career transitioner category. And that's why in my bio, I think Jessie mentioned that I'm a serial career transitioning professional, right? And I'm also an alumnus with the US Embassy Academy of Women Entrepreneurs. So I've really gone through different types of work. The ones that are highlighted in blue are all my various current work that I do in my portfolio of career. So I don't have one career. I went from public sector, public servant, very straitjacket, into private sector startup, then branching into multiple career portfolios at the same time that I'm managing now. So I think it's a lot of transitions that I've been through, especially in the past, I would say 5 to 6 years. Those were really major transitions, going from public sector to private sector. It was not just only private sector, it was also an edtech startup. So I've no background in tech, and certainly no background in private sector at that point in time. And going into a startup was like a bit of a culture shock, but it was something that ultimately I really wanted. And so with that, I went in with to want to make it work out for myself and to use the opportunity to learn as much as possible. Some of those things that upon reflection, I thought that is helpful, and perhaps it will be also helpful for the audience here who are considering your own transitions, right? Some of these things that I'll be sharing next could be also beneficial for you. Okay, so how did I help myself manage the various transitions with that creative confidence and courage? There'll be 5 things that I'll be covering. First one, identity. Second one, purpose. Third one is mindset. The fourth one is community. And then the 5th point is well-being. So I'll go through each one of them in turn, and just short sharing so we can share more, and you can ask more questions or ask for elaborations or clarification later on when we get into the Q&A portion. Okay, so the first one on identity. I think when on this topic of like making career transitions, moving from one chapter of our life to another chapter of our life, very often the thing that people talk about first is, start with why, right? Some of us who are familiar with Simon Sinek's work, he has this very famous book and entire course and philosophy around starting with why, and that is starting with your purpose, right? I want to offer a slightly different perspective. Not that purpose is not important. Purpose is the second thing later on that we'll look at. But I want to say, actually, don't start with why first. Okay? Actually start with who, right? That was the journey that I had. What made me so determined to make that switch was because I started with who. I didn't want to be a career public servant. That was the long and short of it. I really felt that there are many other sides of me that I have not discovered. And I don't even know myself because I have been in the public service like for 2 decades. And I felt that no matter how many different roles and functions and how senior I become in the roles, it was still only one certain sector, right? So there's a certain culture, there are certain processes and workflows and so on and so forth. And I really felt that the world outside the public service was also changing very, very rapidly. And I wanted to discover other versions of myself, other versions that I have not even explored. And so therefore, I don't even know what the potential is. Right? So there were some questions that I asked myself at a point in time. I asked myself things like, okay, so who am I actually? I know who I have been. I know who I was with the different things that I've done. But who was I at that point in time when I wanted to make the switch? More importantly was the question of who do I want to be? Like, exactly what are the different alternative personal future versions that I saw of myself? And which ones of these would be considered as like more preferred futures that I want to really take more purposeful, be more intentional about exploring. And then the other very important thing that I also really sat down and thought about it was which part of my existing or old self am I willing to leave behind in order to make room for new possibilities? Right? In other words, I was asking myself a lot, what am I willing to say no to so that I can say yes to new futures? So I give an example of what I mean by this. When I decided to leave the public tertiary institution, there were folks who find out about it did offer me some like work opportunities, right? But and then I was also given opportunities by my employer then to move into different departments, right? So they didn't want to so-called let me go out of the entire organization. So they offered me alternatives. When I decided to leave the startup, some of my clients, some of my work partners also offered me like jobs at their organizations. In both instances, I said no, because I could see that the alternative futures of myself that I wanted to explore did not lie in those opportunities that they have offered to me. So I bravely said no to them so that I can say yes to going really out there to explore what I wanted to explore, which was to do with solopreneurship, entrepreneurship, also to do with exploring nonprofit work and social enterprise work. Okay. The second thing, which I said, yes, we would have to come to at some point, is of course purpose. And on this note, I would also say that I take a slightly different approach to discovering purpose. Sometimes I feel that the conventional narratives that we have around discovering purpose can feel very stressful and can be very anxiety inducing. Because we kind of think that you craft a purpose, and then once you find your purpose is the panacea for like everything, right? You will know what to do after that. Everything will all fall in place. Maybe it's because of my training in foresight and futures thinking work. In foresight and futures thinking work, the operating context is always that futures are emergent, meaning that we never know what the future will really be. No one knows for sure. So the futures happen as time passes. The future is emergent. And with that I think my own perspective towards purpose in my own life, at least, where my transitions are concerned, is also that my sense of purpose is also emergent. It flows with time, it evolves with time. And that's the reason why I put here the words flow with the why, right? And I would say that even until today, my purpose of why did I want to do all this solopreneurship and nonprofit work and the even social enterprise work, I don't have a concrete why. There are different versions of why, and it changes with the context. And I'm just kind of like flowing with it to kind of like discover where my strengths are. And ultimately, maybe I will arrive at one single purpose that I want to focus for a certain period of time. At this moment in time, I would say that the purpose all seems to all surround helping people with their futures, whether it's businesses or individuals, right? So, but that I'm ready for it to evolve and change, in a few months' time. The third thing that helped me, I think, a lot is related to mindset. And is this idea of the startup of me. This is actually a title of a book written by former LinkedIn founder. Okay, so do go out, look up Amazon and or the library and just borrow it and read it if you're interested to find out more. I got to know about the book from my previous career coach and mentor who used to work in LinkedIn. He has since left, and he introduced this book to me. And it was really interesting because when I read this book, everything just clicked in me. That, I've been working in a startup for 5 years, but really now it's about me becoming the startup in this journey of transiting and exploring and discovering new versions of me, new future me's. Take the startup as myself, which means that you go with a mentality that you may fail at some points, and it's okay to fail. In this next chapter of my life, it's okay to fail and then pick myself back up again and try something else different, make certain changes, make certain improvements, right? That's what a lot of startups do, right? That's the life of working in a startup, really, is to keep on trying, experimenting, testing, and iterating. So I think that mindset was really, really helpful for me, in the sense that I really stayed very open-minded to many different opportunities that are available. And then I take the opportunities as they come. And it gave me a lot of courage, I think, this mindset of the startup of me. The next point is on community. And on community, I think there are actually really two things to look at. First of all, I think what really helped me as well in this journey of transitions is finding a tribe of very close friends, people who support me. I mentioned about my career coach and mentor. He was one of the very instrumental people at that crossroads that I was at. He really helped me clarify the thinking. He was my thought partner. And he was also my cheerleader. And of course, when it comes to planning certain actions to take and all that, he was my accountability partner as well to make sure that I stay on track. And then there were many other friends that I have, and quite a number of them are also fellow coaches. So I had a very supportive tribe, and they kept me going even when my belief in myself got shaken. Okay. The second thing is about contributing your gifts. By gifts, I mean like your talents, your strengths, your time. So it's about really looking at the transitions, but also looking at how is it that we can help others and support others in this process of the transition, so that the focus is not just only on me, and myself, right? And that I use these transitions to also look at how I can contribute my talents to other people, to other causes. And in the process, I actually got to discover more about myself. I got to discover more about the identity that I really want to shape for myself in future, my values, my beliefs, my strengths, and my purpose. The final thing is on well-being, and I know Daniel did touch on this. And for me, I think this is really key, which is to really build the mental fitness. Going through transitions is really not an easy process. There are times when I will get self-doubt, or I might get a little bit anxious, or sometimes it could be certain things that people around me talk, or peer pressure. You know, that fear of like, oh, losing status. Like I used to be this role, this rank, but now that I'm an entrepreneur, I'm starting from ground zero. And so I lost my status. I don't have like a big team that I can get to go and do stuff for me, things like that. So how do you, what are the kind of narratives that I have in my head, right? And how do I turn those moments when um, I suffer those negative narratives into positive thoughts, right? And how do I rewire my thinking? So I think those are very, very important things for me, these 5 points. I think I will pause at this point and hand it back to the host and welcome any questions from the audience as well.
Hi. Thanks, Carol, for that. So looking at questions, I think okay, so I think for some of you who might not see, I think in the chat, Kaining actually behind the scenes, she's typing a summary of what the various speakers have shared so far. And I'm just scrolling through the chat box. Maybe I'll ask the questions for Carol first. So there's this question from Ruth, and she asked, what really is the push or pull that you would rather have a period of unemployment than to stick with the public sector that's stable?
Thanks, Ruth, for the question. Okay, I think the more comfortable I got in the public sector, the more uncomfortable I got with it. It became increasingly disturbing to me. Especially I think that at that point in time, uh, the world outside was already going through a lot of exponential changes. AI did not happen yet in a very big way, but there were already other changes that was happening. And maybe because I worked in a polytechnic at that point in time, and the polytechnic itself was also going through a lot of changes, and um, it was going through a lot of changes in response to everything that was happening outside. So because I was involved in those policy work, so I was very cognizant of all the changes that were happening outside, and I just felt like bear with me, this is a little bit of my overactive imagination perhaps, but I really felt a bit like after nearly 20 years, I felt like I'm a kind of like still like a frog in the well, that there's so much that I don't know, and I don't know what I don't know because I have never stepped outside of this well, right? And then the next thing was that I also felt a little bit like I don't know whether I'm the frog in a pot on a slow boil, right? So, like I said, I had a very fertile imagination. I do, and I still have. But I really had that feeling, and I couldn't shake it away. I really couldn't shake it away. So I was very certain that there were other versions of me that I have not achieved. That as I firmly believe, I think that there's potential in me that I have not explored and I've not maximized, and that I don't think that staying in the public sector would be the place where I can explore and find those parts. And I think true enough, it really turned out that way, right? Going back to a little bit about what I shared earlier on, I've never worked in the tech sector. When I told my husband that I wanted to take up the tech startup job, my husband, who has worked in tech sector all his life, looked at me and went like, "Are you sure?" Because even he couldn't believe it that I wanted to make this leap of faith. But I did make this leap of faith, and I gave myself the word that I would make the most out of that opportunity, that I owe it to myself. So I offered myself to take on roles beyond what I was hired for, and it was in my job description. And because I was willing to do more as I wanted to learn more, eventually I got promoted through the ranks, and I ended up being the second person in the startup. It was a future that I would never ever have imagined when I was still a public servant. I would never have imagined one day leading a team of all male software engineers and UI UX designers. And I'm not trained in tech, and I do not code at all. So life is very life works in very mysterious ways. I think sometimes if we permit ourselves to let ourselves go through a journey of discovery, I think we will get surprised ourselves. We may get surprised ourselves. I was very surprised. And I know I put in a lot of effort to that. And that got me where I was in a startup. But it was a very steep learning curve for sure. But yes, I wanted to make good on the promise to myself that I will maximize the opportunity.
I think it's really like inspiring to hear. I really like what you use, like the frog in the well and also the frog in the pot. And I think I think as we also started the career chapter, I think it takes really, really, really a lot of courage, like going into transitions regardless of public to private, private to public. So maybe I think while we are still like we have questions coming in, but maybe humor me, but I'm curious like what are some of the surprises that you encountered in your transition? Daniel, would you want to take that?
Okay, I maybe I take one question from the chat. XR asked whether there are any certain trigger points or motivations which influence my decision. Okay, there are not a specific trigger point or a specific motivation. I've shared earlier that actually it took a course from a long time ago, even as young as when I was still in primary school, being in a kampong-like kind of primary school. And it kind of built over time for me to have this motivation to go. Okay. But and one of the slides I mentioned about what are the things that I could be the pull factors lah. I think another question was on pull factors that really make me want to consider something in the social service, because I find that I have been to this high part of the banking circle, and I've seen so much contrast in the people who are not so privileged, and I felt that maybe I could do something to help some people lah. So by definition, a charity is actually the business of doing good. If you may want to use that term, the business of doing good. And the business of doing good is trying to make a difference in people's life. I think oftentimes we are quite fortunate to have been in Singapore and see yourself being socially mobile. I think most of us are, but a lot of people never had the opportunity. See, so as I said, social mobility actually means helping people find decent job, helping their family have better healthcare, or path towards a healthcare and better education, so they can bring them up the ladder, social mobility. So I felt I could play that part. So that was actually really the very much the pull factor. Okay. And then yeah, Justin, you're asking me about perspectives. What came about? Okay. I think I'd rather share is after I entered the social service, what were the news perspective then? Okay. Some background, when I transitioned to social service, then it was during COVID. I was hired as a counselor, and I assisted to develop and launch a program to help business owners who are faced with problem debts. Yeah, I'm an ex-banker, right? So people talk about problem debts. Then I also counseled people who had alimony issues. I was appointed a commissioner for oath, and I took on the corporate office role, which included recruitment, onboarding. The finance team reports to me, and I'm a member of the fundraising team. So I want to also bring in this part where somebody asked, I think it was Ruth who asked, is there any particular sector that's harder that you need more consideration? Okay, I can't answer that for sure, but in my next part of sharing, you can think about it lah. which sector has more considerations. Okay, let me share. So when you counsel somebody, you meet people with all sorts of combination of issues. Nobody has one issue. Most of them have 2 or 3 issues. Okay, like they got no job. But sometimes they got no job because their mind very lazy. You can tell one, they're not interested to move themselves at all. They don't want to work. Some are just underemployed. Some are elderly. Some got medical issue and therefore cannot work. How are you going to help these type of people, right? Then some people have young children, can't go to work. Okay, and some of the children are latchkey children. Some are they divorced. And for divorced people, they got major housing issues. Some are abused. Some have a gambling addiction. Some have mental problems, mental issues, suicidal tendency. So the question to say which sector has more consideration is where your own self comfortable with. By definition, social work means I have to deal with people. So what type of people you want to deal with and how comfortable you are in doing that. Okay. I can give another example. I have a colleague rather, whom we hired, and she actually was in banking for almost her whole life. And then she had a 4-year hiatus. Okay, husband is well-to-do. She actually went to people's house and then sit there and then entertain the old people. She's not there as a maid. She's just helping them entertain people, this and that. After 3, 4, she realized that actually, maybe that's her calling, It didn't come overnight. It came over a while. And then she said, okay, I want to help people who have these issues. So she entered the CCP program, the career conversion program, and we picked it up, and then we hired her. And I think she adjusted very well to this social service. Okay. Okay, I guess the other thing that there's a new perspective for me and made me quite motivated is that besides having people with issues, there are also people on the riverside, very resilient. People we can actually learn from them. Okay, I'll give you an example again. I met one counselor who had a broken marriage, a young lady, got a young child. She operates a canteen in a school tuck shop. Then guess what happened during COVID circuit breaker, right? But she's very cheery, I'm very motivated by that. And she says, oh, no problem, I have my PMD. And what is a PMD? Personal mobility device, the scooter thing. Then she said, no problem, I can go and deliver food. I'm very happy doing it, So she pivoted. Right? That's the word, pivoted. Another one that I had was a construction contractor. What happened during COVID time? He spent all his money, buy a credit card, use personal loan, go and develop a certain, renovation or something for somebody that don't pay him. So I told him, I said, can you stop doing it? What for you go pay money, people don't pay you? It's a bad debt, He said, no I cannot This is the only thing I know how to do. So finally, I got another colleague who happened to do Lala Move, and then he introduced him. Then when he started Lala Move, he said he has to work very, very hard. But he said he makes more money without taking any risk. So again, another example of people who pivoted out to something else. So these are very resilient people that we can all learn from. So that's also another kind of new perspective that I felt when I did my work in my social service agency. Yeah.
I mean, so nice and heartening to hear all these different stories in the social service, and I think we have maybe we wanna maybe the next question maybe would be for Carol. Okay, so Carol, this is a question from Julie. So she asked, so she said, thank you for sharing your journey of finding and reinventing yourself. You talked about how you had different versions of purpose and how your purposes evolved over time. So looking back in time, how has your purpose changed today and how do you feel about it?
So I think on this question of purpose, I will need to go back to when I was 14 years old. When I was 14 years old, and that's many, many moons ago. That was when I guess that was my first recollection of purpose for myself, because at the age 14, that was when I kind of like decided that okay, I know what I want to do for my first job. I actually really wanted to become an urban planner. True story. And I know it was like it's this kind of like how many people are urban planners in Singapore, right? What is even this job about, right? Okay, so I got inspired because I went to attend a public exhibition by Urban Redevelopment Authority (URA) then, and I got very caught on with this the things that they were exhibiting and all the long-term plans and the vision of Singapore. So my sense of purpose then was, wow, I think this is really great job. This is a very purposeful and meaningful work that I'm involved in shaping my own country, my city state. So that was the purpose that was driving me then for the rest of my education, all the way through to eventually, yeah, choosing the university that I wanted to go to, and getting the scholarship from URA to go and overseas to do the education, and then coming back and working, serving back the organization, and that was my key purpose, to help build Singapore for the first 10 years of my. I know it sounds extremely altruistic, but yeah, really there was that really very idealistic side of me, and I still I always tell people, you can take me out of URA, you will never take URA out of me. So until today, I still remain very, very connected with my ex-colleagues in URA. I still go back for all the alumni gatherings. I still bring my kids. Yeah, I know. I still go back to bring my kids to the Singapore City Gallery to visit the exhibitions and all of that. So that is one purpose. Then when I moved to the Polytechnic, the purpose changed because it was then the Polytechnic has always been viewed as a very poor cousin of junior college, right? And I just really felt that the future of education and the future of work is going to look very, very different. And I felt that actually the Polytechnics in many ways were in a much better position to train and equip the students with what they really need in the real world. There may be some of you here who are educators, and if you're a JC educator, I'm so sorry if I sound very biased. I used to go through I was a junior college student as well, but after working in the Polytechnic, I have to say that I think that skill-based education is really very important, that connection with industry experience through job attachments and internship, the future of work. Yeah, it is the Polytechnic and applied learning style is really something that caters to the future of work. So that became then my purpose. My purpose was to help the public, and importantly, teachers, principals, educators, and parents understand this shift that was happening out there in the world, and then therefore shift their mindsets about Polytechnic education and about that specific Polytechnic that I was working with. So there was a lot of that branding and marketing work that was involved. So that marked my sense of purpose for the next 10 years. When I decided to come out to try something else in the private sector, I think that sense of purpose went from something more altruistic, right, into something that was really very personal. It was not about like trying to, shape Singapore or change people's perceptions. It was just about, no, I think now is the time when I want to focus on myself and I want to discover different purposes of me. And I wanted to try something that I have never done before. So that purpose became more inward looking in that sense. It was just really about how to discover my potential and maximize it. The shift then towards leaving the startup to going into a kind of I was just corrected on this today. I used to say that I'm on a semi-sabbatical. I was just corrected today by a friend that no, I'm not on a semi-sabbatical, because I'm probably never going back into that kind of full-time employment. I will probably stay in self-employment for a longer time. I think it was really, again, about discovering yet another aspect of me. And this part of me, I started out thinking that I wanted to really become to share my experience and expertise in the startups and in my years of working in the public sector, being involved in foresights with organizations and businesses. But along the way, I got involved in youth work, right? A friend had founded a social enterprise dealing with youth, asked me to consider joining them. I told them that No, I would do it maybe only on a part-time basis, but I wasn't closing that door. So I explored that. And then there were other opportunities. The polytechnic that I worked at got me back on project basis to coach the students, basically to get me to impart my experience in startup, in product innovation, in business pitching, and coaching the students with it. And it was through these opportunities to work with the youth, to train them, to coach them, to mentor them, that I realized that, wow, this part of it really grounds me. And there's always this very delightful sense of fulfillment that I get after interacting with the youths, after facilitating a workshop with them, or coaching them through a period of time. And I think that sense of purpose now went towards a little bit more about like education itself. So it's not so much of the technology in the ed tech anymore. It's really more on like the education part of it. And then it ended up that yeah, I think the most recent thing was this March. I actually co-founded a nonprofit, which is about teaching our educators and young people here in Singapore about futures thinking. And that is very much related to the education piece of work. So I think that's where I mean by, I see that my purpose is shifting. My purpose is evolving. My purpose is expanding. It's expanding, but yet at the same time, I can see that the purpose now has a certain shape around this whole idea about helping people think about the futures, imagine their futures, shape their own futures. Yeah.
Maybe Carol, I think we have a very similar, like a very good segue to the next question. So there's this question from Lata asking, like, can you share a little bit more? I know because you teach this, but like, share a bit more about what is foresight and futures thinking. And then the part two of a question is, and do you think it's necessary to be certified to become a coach?
Okay. Yeah, so foresight and futures thinking is very much about this um discipline of like thinking frameworks about how to think about the futures, right? And really think about the future as being there is no one single version of the future. At any point in time that we are in the history, there can be many different possible futures that can happen. And how do we prepare for that kind of uncertainty, right? And that's why futures thinking is a very important skill, is an increasingly important skill to help businesses build resilience, to help businesses when they come up with their strategies, when they come up with their business plans, that they need to also expect the unexpected, right? And be able to anticipate some of those things. Like, for example, people talk about like COVID being something very unpredictable. But of course, when we think seriously about it, was it really super unpredictable? After all, the world, well, half the world went through SARS not that long ago, right? So it was not a kind of scenario that the world has not been through, at least not in this part of the world, right? We've been through that before. So how do we think about all these different possible futures that would happen? And then which of these futures are actually more desirable? And therefore, we want to try and work towards them. But yet at the same time, we need to make preparations to mitigate risks. If our less preferred futures happen, how do we respond? So we come up with those response plans in advance so that we don't get caught unawares. So that's what foresight and futures thinking is about. I think my surprise discovery in the past year was how what I learned in scenario planning for business and organizations can also be applied to personal futures. So it's really talking about like, okay, so me planning what's my next chapter, what's my next stage, where do I go next? I can use the same thinking frameworks and methodologies and help myself as well as help other people consider the different kind of preferred futures and desirable futures that they may want to go into. Regarding whether it's necessary to be certified, no, it's not necessary to be certified for sure. I think coaching skills are in general good to learn, especially if you are going to be assuming certain leadership or managerial positions in the company. For myself, I think that when I got trained as a mental fitness coach, it was a big plus because I learned skills that I could apply to myself in helping me manage the transitions, right? But whether it's a necessary skill, definitely I would say no, it's not a necessary skill. It's a good to have. Yeah.
All right. So I think like Carol, you've been talking about like your transitions and whatnot, right? Like moving forward, moving forward. But I think there's a question for Daniel about going back. There's a question for Hui Ming for Daniel where she or he assumes that you're still working for a nonprofit. Have you considered going back to the private sector, especially the banking sector, since you can get much better pay in that sector? So why or why not?
Sensitive question. Opportunities, when they are available, I definitely will consider lah. Okay, actually, I wanted to interrupt you. I rather go to one question from Gerald. I don't know whether he's still online. He asked a question which I kind of prepared a bit of answer lah. Okay, his question was in transitioning to a new sector or area, how difficult was it to convince potential employers to take a chance? Any sharing? Okay, I prepared a bit of an answer, but it's meant for people who are looking at full-time work and not part-time fractional work. Okay, and it has relation to do with the career conversion program. Okay, so I was involved very much into it in hiring people via this program. So I'm selling some koyo also here. There are 30 sectors if you go and look at the WSG website. Okay, just name a few: healthcare, air transport, travel, food sector, energy, etc., etc. I can share a little bit more about the social work, social service sector. Okay, so these are meant for people who are looking at full-time work who want to transition, not those who do part-time after that they go away. Okay, what are the things, how to convince your employer if you really go for an interview? Okay, so the process is like that. When you do an interview, we like to ask you questions that ask you about your motivations, right? I think the earlier part of the sharing, what are the consideration, your family support, social circles, lifestyle adjustments, this and that. Again, we don't ask you directly, do you have how many children? What is your family responsibilities at home? Because MOM will come and chase you and say you're not supposed to ask these type of questions. But in the interview process, we tend to ask you these questions. Okay, I can also tell you that in the interview process, it will not be a purely Zoom thing because we will want you to come and see how you are actively, mentally, your personality, things like that. So is it difficult to convince? I think no lah. If you're genuine about what you do, it will come up quite clearly. But I like to reverse the question back to the person who's looking for a job. Actually, it's about you. Are you truly committed or not? Okay, why? Okay, let me just share it in the context of the career conversion program. Every month, I think there are different sectors will recruit. So I think for the social service and the medical sector, they do say it sometime in September. So all of us will get a whole list of 200-300 people. Okay, not unlike any other kind of job that you look for. But in the questions, they ask you your 2 previous job, your salary, your designation, what are your reasons for leaving. All these questions you'll be asked in that questionnaire designed by WSG. Okay, but why I say you there? Because you'll go in and you're going to take either a graduate diploma if you're a degree holder, and you'll be 1.5 years of study. After the 1.5 years of study, you're going to take a bond for 1.5 years. So it's 3 years already. The good thing about it is 90% of your salaries are paid. That's why it's nice to hire people from the CCP program. And 90% of all your course fees are paid. So you don't have to really pay a single much cent. Another good thing is that you only work 4 days a week, but no privileges, no benefits are cut from you. Okay? Then I must say this. The negative thing about it is that if you break your bond, the onus is on the employee to have to pay back all these things. And it's a lot. Trust me, it's a lot. So hence I come back to say it's about you. If you are really genuine about wanting to do it, hand to heart commitment, this genuineness come through, no problem interview, we can tell it. Okay.
And I think that, Daniel, that also like indirectly like answers like what is your, whether you have any plans to like move back to banking. Like you say, opportunities, but I think if you ask like from person to person, I think each individual in terms of any transitions that you made, I think you yourself need to be personally clear about your own motivations, because what your answer might be might be different from individuals to individuals.
Yeah, correct.
Over in the chat box, right, we also shared a link to the list of career conversion programs from My Careers Future. So if you're interested to find out more, you could click in the link provided there. Okay, I'm just like going through the questions on mental fitness. There's a question from Laya Wu. Sorry if I butcher your name. So this is a question for both Daniel and Carol. So you talked about like mental fitness, right? How do you build mental fitness when you made the switch that may surprise some friends? Do you encounter situations where your relationship with your friends were somewhat negatively impacted or changed? And how do you cope mentally? I think Carol mentioned a little bit about your husband moving from. Do you
Yeah.
want to elaborate?
Well, I mean, husband being my husband. So yes, he did kind of prepare me for the fact that it would be a steep learning curve. And I think he asked me that question quite a number of times. But ultimately, I think he really respected that it was a journey that I needed to get onto. And he could feel he knew that I was getting very restless in the public sector work that I was doing. And I think eventually he actually really supported. In fact, uh, he asked me, so how long do you think your discovery journey is going to be? Sorry, my husband is a very pragmatic person, so must have time boxing. I don't know, maybe this is very typical male. Okay, so he asked me, so how long do you think you will need to go on this discovery journey, right? And then I told him, well, okay, maybe if you can give me a year, I think that would be great, because I want to use the time to go back to the books, to get some, do some learning, studying again, relearn certain things, unlearn certain things. And then I wanted to try out all these different kind of like work, right? Coaching gigs, social enterprise work, nonprofit work, volunteer work, all those kind of things. And so he said, when I told him 1 year, he kind of laughed a little bit, and he went like, entrepreneurship is not that easy. 1 year will not get you very far. Why don't you try 2 years? So officially from him, I have permission for up to 2 years. I know it's very funny, right? But yeah. So I think but I have to say that I'm really super thankful to him. Because he is my greatest pillar of strength in this whole process. I can say for sure that my mom doesn't understand why I decided to do this thing. He thinks I'm completely nuts and crazy. Uh, for that matter, I have 4 kids. Okay, yeah, so I'm raising 4 kids. And by many people's books, I think they would think that oh, this is like very foolish. This is foolhardy. This is like maybe even bordering on like being a bit irresponsible, like you have 4 kids and then you want to go on this like transition process and all that, and then like what age are you already trying to behave like a Gen Z, that kind of stuff that people come up with, right? All the different narratives out there. Just so I go back to my number one. Again, which is about identity, right? The first factor. What is the identity that you see yourself becoming? That has got to be like almost like the foundation of why you are on this journey. So I'm driven by a vision of myself in future. And then I think what has been helpful is definitely my mental fitness training, that has helped me understanding the neuroscience of how our brain works, understanding how sometimes we just don't have very helpful narratives in our head. It could be because of upbringing. It could be because of social pressure. It could be because sometimes our own strengths get overplayed, right? And they become unhelpful, or they tell us certain self-limiting beliefs. They construct certain self-limiting beliefs in our head that are not helpful. And I think it's a lot of really practicing different strategies. So for me, I'm trained in positive intelligence. For those of you who are interested, you can go and again borrow the book. It's actually founded by a professor from Stanford University, and he has conducted this research with more than, I think, 1 million people by now across more than 50 countries. And he has got profiling tests that runs with it. He has published a book. You can go and read the website as well. Some of the, quite a lot of the information are actually open source. And you can go and read more about it to try and understand neuroscience and understand like how your brain works, and also how you can rewire your brain. So I incorporate that futures thinking and foresight, as well as what I learned in positive intelligence, into my coaching for individual professionals in looking at their personal futures.
I like to add about this mental fitness thing. I actually don't really have an answer directly for it. These are the challenges that people in this sector tend to get. Okay, number one, your work setting is not, usually it's not in the office. Sometimes you go to people's house, elder care home, and you see people in all sorts of different states of mind, right? And then second big challenge we have is people. Organizations are made of people. So when there's people, there's always these dysfunctions that happen. What you think happens in the private sector, you also see in the public sector. You have dominant people, long timers who think of very fixated with their view. They think they're the only view, and that's the only way to bring the organizations forward. And therefore, dysfunctions happen. Okay. Number three, the other big challenge which affect your mental fitness is the lack of resources. Okay, chances are your laptop that we have is probably a few generations ago. Your printer that prints so slowly, your photocopying also doesn't really work very well. There are a lot of things that break down. Okay, these are the kind of environment you may encounter. Okay, it's understaffed. Very certainly, most SSAs are understaffed. So you need to do multiple skill sets. Okay, for myself, I'm quite digital unsavvy lah. So I always have to ask people to help me with the data analytics and presenting my presentation skills and things like that. Okay, salary I already mentioned. So all these actually take an emotional and mental toll, and therefore your mental fitness. But lo and behold, I believe most SSAs will give you what you call an employee assistance program. So every year you're given chance to speak to real counselors who can help you with your mental issues, this and that. They even bring in your family or your spouse to help them to cope if there's any of these issues that you have. Okay. But on the other side, I want to look at it positively, and I want to quote this Andy Jassy, Amazon CEO, about a positive mindset. Instead of thinking of how I'm going to survive my mental fitness, why don't we change ourselves and say, can we have a positive mindset? Then we try to avoid having a problem. So this is what he said. It's not an exact quote, but this is what he said. Positive attitude is the most important factor. He defines positive attitude as hardworking, reliable, team player. Okay? As a Singaporean, I add some more things. Don't complain. And don't complain too much. You will never be happy one. Okay? He also says you must have a can-do attitude. So as to take advantage of opportunities to build strong relationships with colleagues. Isn't that important? Because your colleagues are your world when you're in the working place. So we cannot change the circumstances, but we can actually reframe and we can respond to those circumstances. So a positive mindset is something that all of us can have some form of control. I think that's what this Amazon CEO is trying to say. So
on the other hand, I also want to add on a little bit that I feel that part of that positive mindset is also about letting go of control. Because I think very often we I said that futures are emergent, right? And I think what adds on to the anxiety that we have, and that is that uncertainty of futures, right? And we have this innate, human beings being human beings have this innate need to control things, so that things are within our like frame of expectations, right? Within our anticipation. And then we feel more assured when we kind of like have a certain degree of certainty of what's going to happen, because then we would have thought of how we're going to respond to that. And so we tend to, in a way, overreact on the control factor. I think positive mindsets is also about identifying which are the things that we can control and which are the things that we cannot. And the things that we cannot control, we should just cut ourselves some slack, really, and just let go a little bit. I'm not saying let go 100%. I'm just saying that sometimes even letting go of that 10% to 20% can do wonders for our mental well-being. And I say that because of my experience in coaching clients, that many of them actually drive themselves up the wall because of this, needing to control, needing to aim for a certain perfection. But if we actually know that, yeah, the future is really, it is meant to be uncertain. And maybe what we can do is we can do our best within our limits of control, but the factors that we cannot control, we should just really, yeah, sit back and relax a little bit. Yeah.
Maybe I just want to be a little bit cheeky over here, because just now there was a question about how do you get employers or hiring managers to convince them are taking a chance on you. So I think just now, like Daniel already mentioned a little bit about it, but let's say if I am looking at transitioning into a new role, it doesn't even have to be a new sector. Do you have any tips to at least prepare what you can prepare so that you could more or less like be more in control with what the future holds?
Um, if you have some idea about what is that new sector that you hope to transition into, definitely, if you can, try to start taking baby steps to prepare yourself for it. By that, I mean, go and take courses, go and read the books, go and also network. So one important aspect of, I think, the factor that I talked about just now, community, right? I said about finding your tribe. That tribe is not only the supportive circles, but it's also about finding the tribe of those professionals who work in that new industry that you're trying to get into. Start doing some of those kind of networking, right? Talk to those people. Maybe you can get even one of them to become a mentor or like an advisor of sorts to give you a bit more insights into that industry. And what are the inner workings? What are the challenges? What are the things that you need to prepare yourself for it? Maybe you have to pick up certain new skills, or just the understanding about the industry, and then able to kind of like draw certain associations perhaps with the skill sets that you currently have, or maybe with the experience that you have, and look at whether there are certain transferable skill sets and transferable experiences, right? And if you're networking with somebody who is in that industry and you can share and relate your current skill sets and experience with them, get their help to also see from their perspective, right? Where there are these transferable areas, right? So don't wait till you meet the recruiter from the industry and that recruiter is your first person, your first contact person from the industry. Start doing that networking early, and then find out from them what do I need to get upskilled in, perhaps, in order for me to be able to make an easier transition, and really be very open-minded about doing the learning. I would say, yeah, the curiosity is it will go a very long way.
I like to bring up one question. It's a very itchy, sensitive question again. I think someone asked about ageism. Okay, does it happen? Of course. We don't say openly, but of course it happens. And I think that's where Courage Chapter comes in, to try to dispel to employers, don't do this sort of thing. If you want to take MOM's tripartite, Employment Act into consideration, then that shouldn't happen, but it happens. Okay, but I can say as a general point of view, in certain SSAs, because of the nature of the work, let's say like counseling, for example, actually is biased in favor of older people. I can tell you honestly, nobody is below 30 years old, okay, in the organization that I'm in. Everybody has to be older, and we tend to look at stability of your mind, this and that. So they tend to be older people who already have children, or then they're fine. To be honest, there are people who are 70 years old. The average age is about 50 years old. Of course, they're also trying to bring it down to the 40s, but a bit hard because of the nature of the role you're in. But on the other hand, I guess if you're doing social service in the medical industry where you need strength and healthy people, then probably you sign the age group a bit younger. So the answer to is there ageism? I think it does, it has, but choose a sector where that is least likely to affect you in your age group.
I think I'll also add to that, look at the sectors and the roles where actually age and experience is a strength, is an advantage, right? There are actually increasing, I think, roles in, well, social service is one of them. I think in education as well, that experience and expertise is a plus point, right? And in those sectors, then perhaps age is not a deterrent, and age could be actually a bonus to that. I know that in the schools that we work with at the social enterprise, the education and career guidance counselors that MOE hires and assigns to secondary schools, a number of them are your mid-career transitioners, right? Mid-career professional conversion transitioners. So they have their corporate industry and business experience and all that, and then maybe they reach a certain point as well that they feel that they want to do work that for more altruistic reasons, or they want to create impact in a different way, and then they make them transition into education space. So those are the possibilities as well. That yeah, but if you are looking at then very competitive industries, yes, it could become a challenge. Like I mentioned earlier on, even for myself, when I was trying to transition out of the public sector and I went to speak to a HR recruiter, right? She did mention that, yeah, it would be more expensive to hire me than somebody who's younger. So that is very real. But again, I would say look out for different kinds of opportunities. Just be very open-minded. Sometimes it could be about trying to do something for a short period of time as a kind of like a test for yourself. So in a way, think about like, when we are young, we think of doing internships. Maybe in this next chapter of life, we also need to bring back internships. We need to bring back internships for the next chapter of life where we try out doing something that may be completely different from what we have done before. And we try out to see whether it's something that vibes well with us, that aligns well with us. Hopefully, there will be opportunities like that. I think the whole future of HR is going massive transitions. Because right now we are looking at 5 generations in the workplace. I don't think the world has ever had to manage a workplace with 5 different generations of staff there. And as we all get like to live longer and longer lives, and retirement ages start creeping like more and more upwards, middle life will also keep creeping upwards. So it'll be very interesting how this ageism thing plays out, because I think that chances are that it will become more and more challenging to remain ageist, because everybody is just living a much longer life. Oh, right. I just saw Kai Ning's message in there. Fantastic. Yay, internship opportunities for returnees.
Yeah, so maybe just to share a little bit about what the what the Courage chapter does. So I think very recently we placed an intern. So she went through this internship offered by, it's digital marketing internship. So she was previously she's not a digital marketer. In fact, I think she was from more of a finance and an office background. But like I think what Carol mentioned earlier, like there are a lot of transferable skills from how the corporate environment being able to translate into digital marketing, and also given the in the industry that the particular charity is from is targeted towards seniors. So I think from a senior's perspective, that intern is able to relate a lot better than, let's say, a typical student intern coming out from school. So I mean, this is one of the sort of like the programs that the Courage chapter does, and the plan is that we're gonna have a lot more of these like returnship programs or internship programs that we have here at the Courage chapter, so that we have more and more people embarking on their own very own Courage chapter, and we are able to share all these various chapters and stories with our community, and through that also help to change and improve the narrative of aging here in Singapore. And okay, I am mindful Kani is asking me to wrap up. Very quickly, I think Carol today also spoke a lot about futures thinking. So we actually have this special promotion for as part of the Courage Cafe. So you could scan the QR code here, or we could send out a link later on this 30 minutes explore your personal futures that Carol is offering over here. And very quickly, so you've taken a screenshot, if not, I'll send you later. And very quickly, remember to connect with us on our socials. My screen is not working now. Here's Carol's LinkedIn, on Daniel LinkedIn. We also posted the link in a bit. But again, if this is the first time you're hearing about us, thank you for attending the Courage Cafe. We run this monthly Courage Cafe webinars. Do remember to join our community. Just a quick crash course in terms of how you want to join. So there's a community form under our website, thecouragechapter.com. Fill in the Google form, and then you'll receive an automated email with Calendly. So if there are any if you'd like to find out more about what we do, what kind of jobs that we offer, or you're just curious about who we are as people, feel free to drop like 30 minutes to have a chat with us. Either myself or Kaining will be on the call. And with that, I think we come to the end of run number 4 of the Courage Cafe webinar. For next month's Courage Cafe, we have an AI expert, David, here, who would be teaching us how to harness AI to supercharge your future. And this is really designed for individuals in their second chapters, really want to understand and enhance their knowledge and abilities with a practical introduction to AI tools that really can enhance your personal and also your professional lives as well. So if you heard a lot about generative AI, ChatGPT, and you interested to find out not just like how do you like typing like your questions in it, but there's really an art and also a science on how you go about better leveraging these tools to apply both in your personal and professional lives. And with that, I think we are at the end of the session. If you're interested, you could sign up in the tiny URL link above. And with that, really, that's the end of the session. Thank you so much all for taking the time to join us this evening, and we hope to catch up with you sometime soon. And do keep a lookout to our LinkedIn, our newsletters as well, and also for job opportunities. With that, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.